The number one complaint I hear about salespeople, they talk too much. I mean, it's not even negotiable. It is the worst of the worst sales dumpster fires. Wouldn't you really like to learn how to solve this problem? This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs, and it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing with someone else. Hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast as we continue the discussion about what in the world is wrong with sales training. Today, sales dumpster fire number 2 probably should have been number 1. It's tough. It's a tough call. But the fact of the matter is, we train salespeople to run their mouths. I mean, we do. We don't know we're doing it. I don't think we do it on purpose. How many times have you shown up in a sales call and your salesperson just talked and talked and talked, and you're wondering, are they ever going to be quiet? Are they ever going to ask a good question? Are they ever going to engage the prospect? Nope, they don't. They talk too much. Now, tell me I'm wrong. Fill up my email inbox or my direct messages in LinkedIn. Tell me I'm wrong, because I don't think I am after all of these many years of working with salespeople and having been one of those salespeople once upon a time. And there's a lot of reasons why salespeople talk too much, but the primary reason is we teach them to do this. No, in sales training we do. Think about it. I'm betting your sales training, if you're like the vast majority of companies, it's product-based sales training. It's not really sales training. It's product training. It's product knowledge training. And so what do? We fill them up with information about the product. Have to learn the product forwards and backwards and sideways and every other way. Because when they talk to a potential buyer, they have to know the product, and they have to be able to prove that they know the product and show the buyer they know the product. And buddy, do they know the product? Yes, they do. In fact, they almost can't sleep well at night if they haven't told every single thing they know about the product. And it's all a result of how we train salespeople. We go about this by making sure they understand all the features, all of the information, all of the specific benefits, all of the data, all of the performance data. We've got to make sure they download all of those things. And then once they demonstrate an adequate knowledge of the product, we send them out in the field to call on buyers. And when the buyer asks about a particular product, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to talk about product until it's overwhelming. Now, I mean, I know, because I've sat in these calls. And you just wonder, is there a pause coming? Is there a break coming? And combine it with sales dumpster fire number 1, where they're making all these generic claims about their products, even worse, right? So they're talking and they're making claims that do not move the needle at all, have no justification. In fact, in terms of the way we say, we're the best, right? Well, says who? According to what metric? Right. And so we talked about how to solve that problem, but how do you solve the problem of simply talking too much? You know what's interesting? I have asked in the past 18 years, hundreds of audiences, what's the one thing that people don't like about salespeople? Number 1 answer in a landslide: they talk too much. Okay, why? Well, if you think about it long enough, they're just conditioned to do that. But there are other reasons as well, to be fair. I mean, for example, what do salespeople do when they're nervous and they don't know exactly what to do next? My experience, they talk too much. They fill the white space. Salespeople hate white space. That silence between, in fact, if we can get them to ask a question, if the buyer takes too long thinking about it, they'll fill in the blank for them. Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong, because my suspicion is you've had the same experience if you're a sales leader. And that's one of the things that happens. Here's another way they talk way too much is, we've taught them to build rapport. And so building rapport means talking about me, even though I don't do that in the real world. And when it comes to selling, I've got to talk about my favorite team and my favorite deer stand and my favorite restaurant and, fill in the blank, whatever part of the country you're from. We got to build rapport. And so we'll listen politely while they say a few things, and then we'll start telling them all about us, because clearly we want them to know about us and about who we are and what we do and what we find to be important, et cetera, et cetera. And the final thing that I have found, at least in observation, why people talk too much is because they don't really know where to go next, because they don't spend a lot of time in pre-call planning. So they don't actually have a roadmap for how the call's going to work and what questions they need to ask and what things are important. And they have no priority for that call. They're just making a sales call. And what do you do in a sales call? You talk too much. Well, I think that's probably your experience as well. At the very least, you've seen it. At the very worst, you've got a whole sales team of people who do that way too much. The challenge is we have a tendency to make excuses for it, to justify it, or whatever. The reality is, as well as I do, to become more effective in winning sales, you have to understand the customer. You have to ask really good questions, do good discovery, find out where the challenges lie, find out what their motivations are, find out what issues they're dealing with, find out what business problems they want to solve. And that requires a healthy dose of questions. But then we have another problem, okay? Because we tell them, we tell salespeople, you need to learn to ask good questions. Again, from years and years and years of experience. What do? Oh, they ask questions. What do you use now? How long have you had it? Is it under warranty? Do you have a service agreement? Who'd you buy that from? Which competitor are you using? Which features do you like the most? Where is it failing you? Oh my goodness. I've been with salespeople who have been taught to ask questions, and it's not questions, it's an interrogation. The light in the face and, where were you on the night of the 12th at 8:50 p.m.? You feel like you're being interrogated by the police. And you know exactly why they're asking those questions. Buyer knows why. You're trying to figure out what to sell me. You're trying to figure out exactly what I have and what I don't do and don't like about it, so you can jump in and start this process all over by talking too much about your product solution that will solve the problem. Because the way you influence people in the minds of these salespeople is to overwhelm them with information about how amazing this product is and all of its key features and benefits and data sets and every other thing in the world. And it's predictable. It is absolutely not only predictable, it's consistently predictable. Do you know what a joy it is to be with a true professional salesperson who actually knows how to go about creating dialogue instead of spewing information? You've heard the old saw, right? Salespeople show up and throw up, and that's exactly what they do. I had the opportunity some years ago to interview on a couple of different occasions for a business podcast I was doing at the time, interview a man by the name of Orrin Clough. Phenomenal individual, incredible interview. He's written a couple of books I highly recommend to salespeople. The first one's called Pitch Anything. And while it uses the word pitch, it's a phenomenal book about the psychology of persuasion and influence and the dynamics between buyer and seller. Phenomenal book. Then he wrote a more recent book called Flip the Script. Definitely have to put your hands on that one. One of the things he told me in this interview I have never forgotten, and I've used it in teaching and training ever since, with, by the way, Orrin, appropriate attribution to you. He said these words, I'll never forget it. He goes, information has no persuasive value. Think about that. People make their decisions emotionally. They justify them with all kinds of logic. And by the way, that's not my opinion. That's psychology. It's research driven. It's absolutely proven to be true. The part of the brain where we make decisions is the same part of the brain where our emotions reside. Yes, people make decisions emotionally, but where we process information is nowhere near that part of the brain. And so information in and of itself is just information to be digested, to be sorted, to be decided, is this important or not? But until it impacts me in some way emotionally, it doesn't do anything for me. And so I've seen tons of salespeople who will rattle off these really amazing benefits about their product or service as data points, which makes it nothing more than information because it doesn't get connected to an emotional context whatsoever. On rare occasions, the buyer may perceive it and put it there, in other words, understand that there is an emotional context and they feel it, but that's unusual because typically when we're hearing people drone on with information, even sometimes really important data points, great benefits, it's just information. Information has no persuasive value. And yet, let's circle all the way back. What do we teach salespeople to do? Because we fill their heads with information, they show up and spew information, which has no persuasive value. Now, I can hear some of you going, okay, fine, but don't they have to learn the product? Absolutely they do. Coming up next, I'm going to show you what they need to be doing first and instead of spewing information so that at some point that information will become valuable. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show.
If you're not adding value to the buyer beyond what they can find themselves on Google, then they would rather bypass you. You're adding no value to the process. In fact, you're wasting their time. So once you get that clear in the minds of the seller that they're there to create value at every single touch point, then you start to get a different approach to how they engage. So change the beliefs and then start to gradually change the activity.
Hey, welcome back. It's Sales Untraining. It's that weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. Thanks for being here. As we talk about sales dumpster fire number 2, well, it's one of the top 2 for sure, and that is that your salespeople, trust me, talk too much. And I want you to think about this. Well, what is the objective of an initial sales call? Isn't it to get information rather than give information? One of the things that I like to tell sales teams is this: sequence is everything. Of course you need to share information at some point. You need to do it in certain ways to elicit, an emotional context that impacts their engagement. Yes, but clearly they're going to need to know about the product at some point. But it's the sequence that you put it in that's killing you. Because when you show up and do nothing but spew information, you're killing your sales calls and you don't even know it. And yet we've trained people to do exactly that. We talked about asking good questions. And by the way, that is the answer. Asking effective questions is the answer to solving this problem. But we tried that, didn't we? Listen, we need you to ask good questions. You need to get good information. And so without any real direction, without any understanding of what the actual objective of those questions is, what do people do? Well, they start into some sort of interrogation, asking questions designed to get information so I know what to sell you. Listen, in the big scheme of things, the single most critical sales skill you develop, the one that's going to vault you to the top 10, is more than likely learning how to ask great questions. No, it's not being a good listener. That was my answer for years. Most important selling skill. Yes, that's easy. Be a great listener, because man, that's where you get the information that's going to allow you to know exactly what the path to a sale looks like. And then one day it dawned on me, yes, but no. Why? Because, I could be a great listener and not be getting really good information. It's all predicated on asking really effective questions. And it just happens so rarely that we're not teaching people how to do it. So, okay, Kelly, great. So there's all kinds of sales literature and books out there about asking good questions. In fact, they get categorized. There's new information questions and questions designed to a multiple choice or alternate choice questions and so forth and so on. If you've read Spin Selling or one of a number of other books, you know the kinds of questions. But can you imagine you're in the middle of a sales call, you're just starting out with a sales call. What kinds of questions should I ask here? Should it be that kind of question or that kind of question? That's the problem. Is very generically we say you need to ask those good questions. But what should they sound like? How should they be structured? That's the challenge that we're faced with. Because we're not teaching exactly what kinds of questions to ask, then we leave it to salespeople to make it up on the fly. And trust me, that's not going well. Right? So, okay, Kelly, you've got all the answers. What kinds of questions should we be asking? Well, in a general sense, this is actually easy. We should be asking the kinds of questions that elicit dialogue from the buyer, that we create a conversation, sharing thoughts with each other based on asking those. We should get curious as to what's important to the buyer, right? It's a tactical curiosity. It begins with a really well-structured question, and then we're just excavating those answers, diving into what we're hearing. Tell me more about that. How does that work? How does that impact you? Curiosity is an underappreciated selling skill. And if you combine it with asking great questions, which is nothing more than additional questions behind the question, you get enormous amounts of really great information. We don't act in the real world like we do in selling. What kind of questions should we ask? If I have a new neighbor move in next door and I see them out in the yard, we're both mowing our lawns, for example, I don't approach them to introduce myself and get into, a conversation with them. I'm not thinking about what kinds of questions should I be asking. I don't even have to really consider how to create a conversation because it comes fairly naturally. Hey, introduce myself. Where are you from? When did you guys move in? What brings you to the area? Where did you work before? Is this job related? Those are the kinds of questions that come out naturally because I'm naturally curious about you, and in no way, shape, form, or fashion am I focused on telling you about me. At least I hope not, because that's not going to go well. The neighbor's not going to want to spend a whole lot of time with you if you're focused on telling them all about you. But that's exactly what we do in selling. We show up and we tell them all about us. That's the wrong sequence. Are we going to tell them about us at some point? Sure. Might want to change the way we do that, not make all those generic claims. See Sales Dumpster Fire number 1. Right? But we very naturally go about doing this. We don't show up to spew information about ourselves. But that's unfortunately what we often do. The struggle that we have is that when we get into a sales scenario, we put all this pressure on ourselves to sell. I show up in a sports bar. I'm watching my favorite team on the television, and somebody's sitting next to me, and it turns out they're rooting for the same team or maybe the opposite team. So there's the good-natured ribbing. Tell me about you. Where are you from? Why do you like that team? Or, hey, hope our team does well. But we create dialogue by asking them about them and what they like and all that. There's no pressure to sell anything, so we don't even think about it. My friends, that's exactly the kinds of questions we should ask in a sales call. In fact, I call them strategic dialogue questions. Okay? Not just asking questions, the kind of questions that are designed to elicit dialogue. And in most cases, we do this fairly naturally. We get interested in people. Tactically, we're curious about who they are and what they do, and we ask certain questions. But please, for the love of everything that is good, please do not ask this question. Mr. Buyer, what's keeping you up nights? Wow. But somebody came up with that one a long time. Probably a good question when it started, and then it got worn out as it was taught to everybody on planet Earth. And buyers see that one coming from a mile away. If you ask that question, you better be able to pull it off in a way that doesn't make the buyer want to throw things, okay? Nobody does that. Listen, I'll tell you what my answer is. Indigestion. Yeah, I mean, that's what's keeping me up nights. I had an extra bowl of my wife's phenomenal chili last night, extra jalapenos, and I'm paying the price for it tonight. I mean, really? Now, what's the intent? To find out what's going on in their world behind the curtains. Great intent, bad question. But that's the right idea. Instead of showing up and talking about me, I want to ask about you. So I'm going to ask a question that's designed to do that. Kelly, well, tell us the question. I can't. Every scenario, every situation, every product, every market vertical, every circumstance is different, but I can give you some insights. For example, I could ask this, Mr. Buyer, in my experience in working with people just like you, they have a couple of really typical problems that they're dealing with. And my experience is they're either struggling with this problem or struggling with this problem. Sometimes it's both. Which one of those is creating the most problem for you right now? Okay, and I can go and rearrange that in a number of different ways. Sometimes it's a comparison between two problems. Sometimes it's a contrast between doing this and this. Here's a very generic one that I found opens up all kinds of conversation, has nothing to do with my product or service. Man, in the last couple of years, it's become a real problem to find good people. Wouldn't you agree? I never had anybody go, no, we don't have a problem with that. They're typically start nodding their head. Here's my question for you is, how do you guys find talent? And I've been in 20-minute conversations about how tough it is. We struggle. We're down 2 people. We have all kinds of issues. But I'm creating a dialogue with them and getting some insights into the things that they deal with. I just transition very naturally to, if you're having a problem finding those people, are you down a few people? Yes. How does that impact your operation? Right? Maybe I'm selling a product that they're going to be able to save some labor hours or use fewer people or whatever. You see, there's a lot of ways to get into a dialogue, to get into a conversation that they care about, but I have to think about exactly how I go about doing that. I have to create and structure those questions and practice them until they just fall off my tongue very naturally. And it just sounds like we're in a sports bar, watching a game, and we're getting to know each other. That's the objective. If you want to go next level in terms of selling success, learn how to ask strategic dialogue questions. I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.